Jaime. Jaime Lannister is one of George R.R. Martin's most well-written characters, a clear and brilliant subversion of the white knight archetype seen in so many fantasy stories. At first glance, the fact that Jaime is handsome and an exceptionally skilled swordsman fits perfectly into this trope. But it's his reputation as the Kingslayer that taints his honor, and his decision to throw Bran out of the window that further cements his image as a villain to the reader. This is made worse because Jaime seems remorseless about his reprehensible actions. He is arrogant and unapologetic when people confront him about his past, telling Catelyn Stark during a confrontation, "There are no men like me, only me." The dismissive way that he says this makes him look more prideful and despicable to the reader. He seems to embody the worst traits of a villainous character: selfishness, ruthlessness, and vanity. Yet as the narrative continues, the layers of Jaime's character are continuously peeled back. We begin to understand that his actions and decisions, as questionable and as reprehensible as they may be, come from a place of deep personal conflict and tragedy. In a story that is so full of great characters, Jaime is no less in that regard. And as we read the story from his perspective, gleaning insight into his thoughts and emotions, we begin to understand that there are complex reasons for some of Jaime's past actions. For example, even by pushing Bran out of the window, Jaime doesn't necessarily do that because he bears Bran any ill will. He does it specifically to protect Cersei and her children and the reputation of his family. In an interview with Rolling Stone, Martin said, "Remember, Jaime isn't just trying to kill Bran because he's an annoying little kid. Bran has seen something that is basically a death sentence for Jaime, for Cersei, and their children, their 3 actual children." It's not that Jaime is villainous that he commits this act. It's actually because he loves his family and wants to protect them, even if the way that he does it is deplorable and rash. The same thing could probably be said about Jaime's decision to murder the Mad King. The act itself was dishonorable and terrible from the perspective of the Westerosi, but in A Storm of Swords, we finally find out why Jaime did what he did. The Mad King was intent on blowing up the entire city with wildfire rather than to surrender to the Lannister army. And in doing so, he would have killed thousands of small folk and razed the city to ash. Aerys did not care about who would die in the blaze because he believed that he would survive, reborn as a dragon having turned his enemies to ash. Therefore, Jaime's decision to kill him was an effort to protect the very same small folk he had sworn to defend, saving thousands of lives in the process, even though he was forever reviled as the Kingslayer thereafter.
Tell me if your precious Brandy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, and children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Jaime's most heroic act is the one that brought him the most scorn and judgment from the people around him. And that is the precise reason why Jaime becomes so resentful and disillusioned with knighthood, power, and the very idea of honor and duty.
Defend the king, obey the king, obey your father, protect the innocent, defend the weak. But what if your father despises the king? What if the king massacres the innocent? It's too much.
It's also no mistake that Jaime mostly deals with these emotions after his hand gets cut off, because his hand was the very instrument that made him such a great knight, the same hand that he used later on to kill King Aerys. Jaime defined himself by that very hand, but once it is gone, he begins questioning his purpose and identity. It is through this loss that he begins a journey of self-discovery and redemption within the story. And I think that Brienne becomes an instrumental part of that journey. For Jaime, Brienne represents the ideals of knighthood, the very same ideals that Jaime himself has become so cynical about. When he first joined the Kingsguard, Jaime held those ideals in high regard, believing that knights like Barristan Selmy and Sir Arthur Dane were the noblest and most honorable to ever exist. But then, the more he served the Mad King Aerys Targaryen, the more he became disillusioned with knighthood overall. For example, one time, he stood a night vigil with Sir Jon Darry as the king raped his sister wife, Rhaela, on the other side of the door. Jaime tried to protect her, but he couldn't. "We are sworn to protect her as well," he had finally been driven to say. We are, Darry allowed, but not from him. That was just one of the many incidents that traumatized Jaime and disenchanted him with the very idea of knighthood. I'd even argue that what happened with Ned Stark's brother and father was another example of a terrible incident that likely had the same effect on him.
And later, when I watched the Mad King die, I remembered him laughing as your father burned. It felt like justice.
However, that all changes once he meets Brienne. Brienne reminds Jaime of the very same values of knighthood that he had shunned and suppressed for so long. Despite not wearing the white cloak, Brienne still embodies these important ideals through her sense of honor, duty, and her commitment to keep her vows even after the person that she promised has died. This sort of commitment leaves a profound impact on Jaime's character, and he even gifts Brienne with a Valyrian steel sword that will help her fulfill her duty and keep her oath. In many ways, Brienne reminds Jaime of why he wanted to be a knight in the first place, and this feeling allows him to explore aspects of his character that he had kept suppressed during all of his political intrigues in King's Landing. She changes him and humanizes him, allowing him to rediscover himself, and I think that that's precisely why he goes back for her in Harrenhal when she's in the bear pit. Metaphorically, he is going back for himself. Because of Brienne, Jaime becomes a person who prioritizes honor over family loyalties, which is why he rejects his sister, Cersei, and even his father, Tywin, after he develops a relationship with her. It is because of her that Jaime begins to shift his identity from the Kingslayer to someone who is genuinely capable of true honor and heroism. And this is the crux of Jaime's redemption arc in the books. I suppose the question now is, can Jaime truly be redeemed? Can his past grievances simply be washed away by a few good acts in the present? I think that that's what George R.R. Martin is trying to explore with Jaime's character in the story. And so far, it's a very compelling exploration into this theme. Jaime is one of the most fascinating characters in the entire story because of his moral ambiguity and his drive to be a better man, a better knight even. Although his actions can sometimes blur the line between heroism and villainy, I think that he's so compelling to read about, particularly because it's so interesting to see how Jaime himself deals with this kind of inner conflict, especially after he loses his sword hand. The loss of his hand forces him to have to be vulnerable, both physically and emotionally, and it is through this vulnerability that Jaime is able to confront his own past. He is able to be reflective and empathetic, and this humanizes him to the reader. He isn't a white knight in the way that is often presented in most fantasy stories. Rather, he is layered in shades of gray, and that's what makes him so intriguing as a character. As I said before, I believe that Jaime Lannister is truly one of George R.R. Martin's best written characters. His complex character arc, moral ambiguity, and emotional vulnerability make him one of the most compelling characters to ever follow in any fantasy story. But that's just my opinion. What do you think? Let me know down below in the comments section how you feel about Jaime's character. And if you like this video, click the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for future content. Thank you for watching. Peace.